Hello, everyone. You're listening to Those Are the Girls with Mallory and Friends. I'm Mallory.
I'm Victoria.
And we are changing culture and bringing back traditional values. Okay, you guys, we have a very hot button issue we're going to be talking about today. I'm so excited to talk about this. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, and I'm really glad I found someone who's very knowledgeable on the topic and can discuss it. So we're going to be talking about the Equality Act that is now in the Senate. And to talk to us about it, we have Amanda Kepplin. She is an executive assistant on the House side of the Hill. She is getting her master's in business administration at Georgia Southwestern State University, and she is currently a Heritage Foundation's congressional fellow. And she has worked in the private sector as a assistant branch manager. I was about to say an assistant branch Amanda.
Are you assistant to the regional manager?
Yes, actually, fun fact.
And then she's also loves traveling. She's been to Australia and China, and she grew up in Nebraska. And she loves getting brunch, don't we all?
Oh,
and
so good.
Being outdoors and going to the gym. So Amanda, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So what is your favorite brunch item?
Everybody else's, which is bottomless mimosas, but
yes.
Definitely Eggs Benedict.
Oh, me too. I love a good Eggs Benedict.
See, I like my eggs like completely cooked.
Oh no.
Then you like dip the potatoes in like the eggs.
But tons of people like it, and I'm glad you guys enjoy it. I'm sure people listening are like, Mallory, you're crazy. I just that sounds so gross. But anyway, so I guess let's just start off with, can you give us like a brief summary on the Equality Act? Because before you do that, I want to say like one thing that we talk about here on the podcast and we are thinking about and working on is how to make our conservative message not sound as sweet and fluffy as the left, because the Equality Act sounds wonderful. Everybody should be equal. We love everybody. Just agree with our equality. Can you like tell us what is really the Equality Act?
Yeah, I'll do my best. There's a lot in this bill. It's 30 pages long. Basically 30 pages. Essentially what the left is saying is just like ending discrimination, which, like you said, sounds amazing. But in reality, what it is doing is it's elevating sexual orientation and gender identity, not just sexual orientation. That's important to note the difference, to a protected class status in pre-existing like discrimination laws, like at the federal level. And these like discrimination laws, they govern like public accommodation, employment, public housing, federal finance assistance, and all that stuff. So in reality, like it sounds great, but as we go along, like I can dive into what like all the definitions of those are and how they're kind of, this bill goes in and it modifies it. So it's basically modifying the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and adding, gender identity and sexual orientation to all of those is essentially the summary of this bill. And then the nitty gritty, there's just some really unconstitutional and kind of just chaotic and damaging stuff in it. In my personal opinion, essentially what it's doing is it's shifting discrimination from one group and putting it onto another group.
Okay. So you kind of go saying it's like an add-on to the Civil Rights Act, and like the Civil Rights Act has been great, has created equality for everyone. How is this different?
Yeah, so it's different because the Civil Rights Act, it outlawed pre-existing state-sanctioned discrimination that was causing, systematic inequality and things like that. This is doing, what the Equality Act is doing, which is different, is it's basically forcing every private citizen American to agree with controversial government imposed ideology rather than just like factual information.
And I think that is the biggest, sorry, y'all, one second. I think that is like the biggest thing about the gender identity, because your gender identity can change and there's nothing concrete about a gender identity as opposed to, for example, your race. Your race is your race. Like, you can't change that. That's something that's decided with technically generations ahead of you. And it's decided when you come out, you are a specific race, and your gender identity is just something made up.
Exactly. It's very fluid, and there's no really like concrete, like no one's really drawing a line and saying, well, you're biologically this, you're biologically that. When you start talking about, gender identity and, gender fluidity and stuff like that.
Okay. So before we get into the questions that some of you guys submitted, I have another one. I mean, I guess, no, I'll ask it now. I guess my question is, how do we as conservatives, or how do we as people in general who care about people, how do we go about talking about this without sounding so mean? Because like my concern is like when we post this, I know we're gonna have people, like I know some people who always comment on my stuff or like will send me a screenshot. How do we discuss this without because it just sounds so fluffy? Like I said earlier, like Equality Act, oh, everybody's great, we want to help everybody. What do we do?
Well, how do we talk about it without saying you're sexist?
Yeah, Victoria always knows how to make my words smaller.
I think it's a really good discussion to have for sure. Actually, in the 116th Congress, so we're in this 117th now, they introduced kind of a similar Equality Act. They called it the Fairness for All, and it was kind of a conservative alternative to what is today the Equality Act. The key differences, though, were that it provided like religious exemption, for nonprofits or faith-based organizations, which encompasses more than just like the Christian and Catholic religion. There's so many other religions that their doctrine doesn't allow for this, or thinks it's morally incorrect. And it also provided privacy exemptions and regulations, so that you weren't having the conversation of shared space and what if there's sexual predators that like just go into a shared space and take advantage of laws now. So there's things like that we can be talking about too. And I think the beauty of the First Amendment is that the government was supposed to stay out of this kind of stuff. Like, it was never supposed to be this. It was supposed to be, if you believe this, then you're free to do that. And the line is drawn when it interferes and you're like pushing it on someone else. That's kind of where the line was. It was never supposed to be the government telling you what to do and kind of, telling you what to believe and how to believe it. And you could practice your religion as long as you were being politically correct about it. The Equality Act just goes completely against all of that.
Can you kind of more detail how it is against? Because that's what I'm confused on, because we really don't hear. I've just heard like, okay, Equality Act's bad. From Republicans, Equality Act's good. Like, it gives equality to all women. Like, we need to make sure our women are equal as men. Like, that's what I'm hearing from the left. Like, why is this actually bad?
Do you want the 30-second synopsis or like the hour synopsis?
Let's do the hour, to be honest, because I think we need to unwrap this. Because like, if you do the 30-second, I'm still probably going to be confused.
Sure. So the major thing, the first thing that's like a major issue with the Equality Act is that it doesn't provide exemptions for religious freedom, which in and of itself is unconstitutional. So I'll actually read the bill text. So on page 24, lines 6 through 11, actually says, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 shall not provide a claim concerning or a defense to a claim under a covered title or provide a basis for challenging the application or enforcement of a covered title. So basically what that means is that if there was a dispute between like an LGBTQ claim and like a religious organization, by default, the LGBTQ claim wins, because there is no religious exemption, and it's getting rid of, me being able to say, like the Supreme Court case that we saw with, the baker, who didn't want to promote those messaging as a private organization. They should be able to claim the Religious Exemption Act or Restoration Act of 1993. This bill specifically says they cannot do that. So that applies to, public accommodations, which also in the bill, they went in and they expanded what the definition of public accommodation is. Basically cover every single industry at this point. And it covers, employment, public housing, and federal finance assistance. So none of those, industries or those things that it covers would be able to claim a religious exemption.
So say like a church, like I'm Catholic. So in the Catholic Church, we don't have same-sex marriage. So say like this passes, a same-sex couple wants to get married in a Catholic church. The priest says, no, we don't believe in this. The Catholic Church could get in trouble essentially for saying, no, like because of our religious beliefs, we don't believe in this. We can't marry you.
Correct. Yeah, they would actually be, it wouldn't just be like a hate crime anymore. It would actually be criminal charges, and they would be subject to prosecution rather than protection because of their religious beliefs.
Interesting. So that makes a lot more sense. So like, I mean, okay, wow.
And so, like I was saying, with the the bill that was very similar to this, had similar language that was introduced last Congress, the Fairness for All, has that language in it that provides for those religious exemptions and allows, people to claim the Religious Freedom Restoration Act or cite that, which honestly, it still baffles my mind that we had to have a Religious Freedom Restoration Act when we have the First Amendment of the Constitution.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Which is crazy, but so there was a bill like that last Congress. But this bill just is so radical and steps all over what we've known for, 200 years as religious freedom.
Yeah, this really bothers me because I'm just thinking of how far this can go if something like people want to push this. So when I was getting my master's at Regent in law, we had, I don't remember which lawyer, but one of the lawyers that was on the Baker cake case, and she said that that man was just harassed, and people kept trying to come and like they were trying to push the button because they just wanted to get things through. They just wanted to, and I'm just thinking about like people who are, and I mean, it's not just Christians or Catholics or, I mean, temples. I don't know but they don't typically marry same-sex couples. Mosque, I know they don't marry same-sex couples. It's not just a Christian or a Catholic idea. So this is very concerning, and I'm just kind of shocked. I mean, I guess I'm not shocked that it got through the House. Do you think it's going to get through the Senate?
It's honestly, it's tough to say. Thankfully, because of the filibuster that still exists in the Senate, it's tough to get bills like this that were strictly party line through the Senate still, because the filibuster requires 2/3 majority rather than just a majority. And it's gonna, if it gets called to vote on the floor too, that could play a factor. So I think we'll have to see what happens. Personally, I don't see it getting passed, at least not for a while, but because of the filibuster. But if we got rid of the filibuster this, term, then absolutely it would pass.
Is there anything else in the bill? So you mentioned how there's no protections for religious views. What else in the bill is bad?
So because of the changes in definition, it kind of actually creates a loophole to have federal funding for abortion at federal funding like clinics. Let me see if I can find the actual so it basically turns, moral opposition to abortion into a act of discrimination.
Oh, wow.
So because we're pro-life, like we've been vocal about being pro-life, so we could essentially get arrested and charged for being pro-life.
Doctors could, yeah, if they work at federally funded.
Well, even like us being vocal pro-life. Yeah, would it affect us?
I don't know, unless it's like, because it's more like federal discrimination laws that apply to more like, like those public accommodations and more like the employer side of things and like the medical side.
So like, for example, if we were to decide to get an intern and personally, I would want the intern to be pro-life. So if I found out the intern was not pro-life and we decided not to hire her, we could get in trouble for that. That's how we would get in trouble.
Yes.
Okay, that's crazy.
So how they get this through this bill is they redefine the term sex in like the Civil Rights Act movement to include male, female, pregnancy, childbirth, sex stereotype, or related medical condition. And
okay, pause 2 seconds. Sex stereotype, what is that?
Basically saying that, let me see how I can phrase this. It's basically saying that it's coercing all Americans to like adapt to this specific ideology viewpoint, that marrying a same-sex couple is totally okay, and that the traditional values of marriage being heterosexual only is an act of discrimination now.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay. So, yeah, sorry. It's like all very confusing, and I don't understand how like gender like works, but
me neither. I'm trying to learn. Like, I want to be able to have really good conversations with people, because I think part of our problem is we don't get people on the other side, and I want to learn. It's just another problem with stuff like this is the American people, it's too fluffy. The American people don't know. We cannot. That's why I'm really glad you're on here, and you're doing a great job, by the way, like breaking it down, because I'm here with my notebook. Like, you're doing a great job, because we just don't know. We hear these things. Most people don't take the time to listen, and it's too much. They do it on purpose like that, I'm sure.
Yeah. A great resource that like when I was kind of doing research on all of this and, learning about it as it was going through the House and we were doing our different briefings and things like that, I stumbled across an article by John Paul Morgan in the Federalist, and he is, an openly gay conservative. And the title of it should say it all, but the title is "Why Democrats' Equality Act is Dangerous to Gay People Like Me." And that was on the Federalist. And basically that article was just talking about how, this bill and being able to just constantly, identify as a certain way or, go from male to female right away actually kind of hurts the gay community unintentionally, because it was always, if you're gay, you're attracted to the same sex. Well, if sex is fluid, then
nobody's gay.
Yeah, nobody's gay.
Nobody's anything.
Exactly.
So how does that hurt the LGBT community?
Because it essentially like erases
them.
Sex. Yeah, it kind of erases them, and kind of just erases, sex in general. Like if I'm, a lesbian, let's say I was a lesbian and I'm attracted, to females, then this kind of would say, well, you were just born the wrong gender, so just become a male.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what he was going with in his article.
And that kind of happens, like that mindset is what happens in, I don't remember the name of the country, but there's a country, I believe it's in the Middle East, and they have such a strong transgendered population, but it's only because they make people transition if they're gay. So it's really not helping anybody.
Yeah, and going back to the medical side of this and like forcing doctors to do certain things, another part of this bill is that it would force doctors and counselors who are dealing with, gender dysphoria or people who are struggling with their identity when it comes to gender, to actually perform operations or give, treatment or hormones to satisfy some sort of, gender affirmation.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, it would be discriminatory.
Wow. This is very frustrating that it got through, but I guess I'm also not surprised with what has happened. And what are some of the consequences? So let's say a doctor stands up and says, I'm not going to perform an abortion. I'm not going to give this 8-year-old a gender reassignment surgery. What are some of the consequences?
So it would be the same consequences as if you were to, break any other of the discrimination laws, which is criminal charges or prosecution. You can have lawsuits, all that stuff. And rather than being afforded, protection under the First Amendment,
right,
or, under religious exemption, you basically have no leg to stand on.
Yeah. Wow.
So we went over kind of the religious side. We went over a little bit about how it's pro-abortion, how it hurts LGBTQ community. What else is wrong with this bill?
I mean, that's pretty much
the big points.
The big points. Obviously there's little minute things, in there, but I just think the consequences of those kind of two things alone are enough that this bill never should have been passed and never should have been introduced. Because again, it's so, even with taking those things out, it's just so unconstitutional to begin with, and it kind of draws like a deeper discussion into, well, why are bills like HR 5 or the Equality Act, or even HR 1, this election thing that just passed, why are they even getting introduced when they're clearly unconstitutional? And we kind of adopted the Constitution as our absolute truth when it comes to how we govern, and everything kind of goes back to that. Well, these clearly are not, so why are they still getting passed? So I think it's a deeper discussion to be had, for sure.
Yeah, and I think, to me, what concerns me the most, obviously, is the abortion aspect. But I think what is just very concerning, I think a very cultural thing, is adding the gender aspect about how, because gender is like the way people make it. You can just wake up one day and say you're a boy, wake up one day you say a girl, and that is just such a reflection of our culture. And I think that's why we have to work on changing our culture. That's why we have to work on going back to more traditional values. And that just really, wow.
There's so much in it that, you don't see on social media, even from, conservatives who are like against it. You just aren't seeing like why this is bad and like the specific aspects. And I think that, the message from conservatives, yes, we're against it, but like, here's why. And it's actually, you can spin it in a positive. It's like, well, of course I'm anti-discrimination. But this isn't solving discrimination. It's just moving discrimination from one group of people to another group of people, which begs the question, well, who is getting to choose which group is getting discriminated against, and why are they the ones that are choosing this? Is it wokeness? I mean, and then who defines that? So there is no absolute, absolute truth anymore, I guess.
Yeah.
And question, I just lost it.
Another thing too, this is the one thing that you are seeing like more mainstream about HR 5 or the Equality Act, is how it is negatively impacting females. Because, this act essentially nullifies a lot of the opportunities that were in Title IX. So like protections for females and, different like shared spaces and things like that. Because of the language that's introduced, like gender identity. Obviously we've seen it, with sports, or males, even not even transgenders anymore, just males being able to identify as a female and go play sports. I mean, what's stopping, a straight male from being like, oh, well, I'm not really, the best basketball player when it comes to like male qualifications or standards. So I'm going to identify as a female, go dominate in the female, and I'll get that scholarship, you know?
Yeah.
So there's nothing really protecting that. You know, and again, with the shared facilities and the privacy of aspect of all that, you know, that's something that goes both for females and males. Like, I don't think males want females like using their locker rooms.
Yeah. I think about homeless shelters. You know, a lot of women in homeless shelters are in homeless shelters because of domestic violence. So if you are having issues with men right now and you're trying to be in a safe space, you're not going to want to have, you know, look over and there's a man beside you. And I know that's sad, and my heart genuinely goes out to the homeless trans community, because there is a large homeless trans community. But at the same time, you know, there has to be something else, because also too, I mean, how uncomfortable are they going to be when everybody's whispering, when people are uncomfortable? Like, there just has to be an alternative. And I also don't think it's fair for organizations, because a lot of shelters are run by religious organizations. I don't think it's fair for them to have to accommodate for that person. And once again, my heart really goes out to them. People listening, I don't want you to think that I don't care. But I mean, we have to think about everyone in this situation. So I think there should be a trans shelter. I think there are places coming up like that now, but I think there should be more of them, and they should be more accessible for that community. But I mean, I just think my heart just really goes out to the women who are possibly in a situation like that. You're leaving a domestic violence situation, and you look over and you're in a shelter with your children, and there's a man. That's so difficult.
So what I've seen a lot is that Dems are comparing this to the Equality Act from like the 1970s, and that we need to pass that to get an amendment on the Constitution. Like, I've seen, because we're in here in North Carolina, I've seen North Carolina like House and Senate members trying to pass it, like, to get that on the floor to vote to make it an amendment, because I think we only need like 1 or 2 more states to pass that and make that amendment. Is this the same thing?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm more familiar with like federal like House legislation than I am with like.
Well, I mean, is this the same thing as like the Equality Act they were trying to pass in like the 1970s? Is that what
like
they're trying to?
1964, the one in 1964.
That's the civil rights. There's one like that was targeting like women, because they felt like women were left out of the Civil Rights Act. I'll look it up real quick.
I'm not familiar with it, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, that's because something I was wondering, because I feel like the big thing like I'm hearing about this is like, this is great for women. This is great for women. Is there anything in there that is actually good for women?
There's really nothing in there that isn't already provided in the this 1964 Act, Civil Rights Act already, because, you know, the Civil Rights Act already includes sexual orientation and sex. So it's already like, and we have Title IX, and we have all these things that, you know, feminists past and present, to give them some credit, have worked towards. And I think that this just kind of undermines a lot of what they've, you know, generations of females have worked for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by my personal opinion, by adding gender identity and, you know, just kind of a gender fluidity language to this stuff actually harms females more than it would benefit them. So I don't think that there's really anything in there that benefits females that we don't already have.
So kind of going back to what I found it. So some of the North Carolina Democrat senators have proposed a bill, Senate Bill 15 in North Carolina, to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. They're saying it's hard to believe that my daughter will, that they're saying that hopefully my daughter will be able to enjoy the same constitutional recognition as her brother. Is this what we're talking about with this bill, or is this something different?
I think it's 2 different things.
Okay. That was just something I was a little confused about.
That's interesting. I'd love to do an episode on that, though. I wrote that down. That's very interesting. So let's get to some of the questions people asked. The first one was, how does it affect Christian schools? But you kind of already answered that. And then the next one is, can you compare the Equality Act to the Equal Rights Amendment, is what someone said. And you kind of did that.
I think that was what I was asking.
Talking about, yeah.
Oh, okay. And then the next one is, how does it apply to churches and religious organizations? You answered that. You did a great job.
Well, one thing I will add about the Christian schools, not necessarily Christian schools, but schools in general, is that so if you're a college student and you're looking to get financial aid, and you are, going to a faith-based school, if that faith-based school does not allow transgender or, gay or whatever, or is same-sex schools, you cannot get federal financial aid, because that's considered discrimination, if they don't allow that. So if schools have female-only sororities or, male-only fraternities, and they don't allow most do, and they don't allow the gender identity transfer and merging and shared fraternities and sororities, as a student, you wouldn't be able to get financial aid to go there. So you'd have to pay for that all out of pocket. And that also applies to, any high schools or middle schools that are like, prep schools or all girls schools or all male schools. If they don't allow for, the gender identity thing, then they won't be able to get any federal grants.
Wow. So it affects, this is something I think, once again, it's so fluffy. I don't think people understand what it affects or who it affects. And, we can just stop right there with the whole sorority and fraternity thing. I know some girls that would consider themselves liberal, but they hear something like that. I love my sisters. Why would I want a guy? These are things that we need to be talking about. I do wish, maybe they just don't have the time or they can't, but I do wish some more people that were Republican in the House were doing a little bit better job, letting us know. But that's why we have this podcast. Wow, that's crazy. So how does it affect taxpayers? Was one of the questions. 2 people asked that, actually.
So it doesn't really affect taxpayers, except for, obviously, I don't like that my tax dollars are going to be going towards, federally funded abortions. And there's a lot of things that I don't like my tax dollars going towards. This would be one of them, but it's not really an added expense for taxpayers. Okay. All it's really doing is discriminating against a different group of people. So
okay.
It doesn't really affect taxpayers in that, there's going to be an added cost to it. It's just that, your tax dollars that are funding, these federally funded organizations, if they don't accept this, or if they do accept it, then your tax dollars are going towards that or getting, funded towards that.
Okay.
Same with schools, that get federal grants and stuff like that. If they accept this, as their policy and they go forward with it, your tax dollars would essentially be going towards, this ideology.
Okay. The next question is this an adjustment or an add-on to Title IX at all? Or I guess, you kind of answered that too already.
Kind of. I don't know the exact specifics, but I know that it nullifies a few of the things in Title IX, but I didn't do a deep dive and look at what exactly those are.
Yeah. Okay. So that's all the questions that everyone asks. I want to ask one more question. I'm just thinking about how to word this. I just thought of this.
I wonder if I could find in the actual bill, because I know I read it where it talks about Title IX.
Okay.
I don't want to take too much time, but
Yeah, if not, it's totally okay. It sounds like, I don't know. I learned a lot in this discussion. I tried to listen to a few podcasts about it, and I feel like you did an amazing job. Like, this was a very good,
Thanks.
very good explanation.
Yeah, and if you find with the Title IX effects directly, we can do. Actually, would you mind doing a guest blog post on our blog?
Yeah,
About,
sure.
yeah, so you can just put it in there.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you. So, and I guess like last question on this is, why are people supporting this? I guess. Like, what is the draw? Like, when people are
Why
like,
are Democrats supporting this?
yeah.
That is really the age-old question. I don't know why Democrats support a lot of what they support, to be completely transparent.
Because I guess real quick, like a huge part of their base is the LGBTQ community. This hurts the LGBTQ community. I don't understand why they would want to hurt this part of their voting bloc.
I think a lot of it has to do with, I think they're so confident in their ability to message this, as the Equality Act, and we're actually helping you, and we're all for transgenderism and things like that, that they I don't think they really expect people to do a deep dive into what is in half of these bills. For example, the recent American Rescue Plan, the COVID bill that passed the House, that's now in the Senate, they put out a statistic, and I think it's like less than 20% of the funds of that bill actually go towards COVID relief.
Wow.
So it's just things like that. But you hear Equality Act and it sounds amazing. You hear, American Rescue Plan and it sounds amazing. So like I think they're really, confident in the fact that they can message this really well. In 2022 and 2024 and things like that, and be like, look what we got past the House, we're, politically woke, whatever. And I think, I'm a Christian, so from a Christian perspective, I think it's, it's just an effort to kind of break down like the nuclear family and society, and like that's another podcast on like the nuclear family in society. And it just, I don't know why they support it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm sighing just because this is very frustrating, and my concern is I really am concerned about people, and I'm concerned that people are just not going to understand, or they're not, I guess I said they're just not going to understand why we are against it, and they're just going to think we're these mean, evil people, and it's because we care. There's so many times I've had conversations about so many different topics, and I'm explaining like it takes a minute to get from A to B to explain why this is actually better and why we care. And I just feel like this is just another one of those topics that, because the left is just so good at messaging, they're so good at like the fluffiness, people are just not really going to understand. But the best we can do is just get the information out.
Yeah.
And we really want this platform to be something that like gets information out. We want you to, those of you listening, to listen and learn, and to be able to at least a little bit articulate why X, Y, and Z is good and X, Y, and Z is bad. So, but Amanda, honestly, thank you so much. This was such a good episode. I know I learned a lot.
I came in knowing nothing, so I definitely learned a lot.
Well, I'm glad. I hope that I was able to like shed some light on like what it is, and all that stuff. And there are, conservative alternatives to bills like this that, deal with the trans community and things like that. And I think as conservatives, we have a solid platform to stand on if we're, offering those a solution. And really like our messaging is that you have the freedom of choice. So like if you're a faith-based organization and you want to break from doctrine and you want to serve those people, you're absolutely allowed to do that. There's nothing, saying that you can't do that. And, same with, if you're a faith-based organization and you don't want to break from doctrine, there's nothing that's saying that you can't do that either. And I think that's the beauty of our First Amendment and all that stuff. So on a positive note.
Yeah. Also too, we can call our senators and tell them to vote no. Is that a possibility? So yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how it is in every office, but I know in our office, we collect all that data and we use it, when we're kind of reviewing different bills to sponsor, what issues are really important for our district. So I don't know how all the other offices work, but I know in our office, we really care about what do our constituents think and what are issues that are like near and dear to their heart. So yeah, definitely call your senators.
Yeah, what's everybody.
What's most effective? Phone calls, letters, Facebook messages? What's the best, in your opinion, what's the best way to reach our senators?
The best way is whatever gets into the hands of their legislative staff. Not necessarily like themselves. So definitely the legislative staff, and like some offices, don't have the ability to like call and leave a message, but they have like online platforms to like contact us to kind of like streamline all that stuff. Or they're, or if their messages turn on, it's probably their comms team that's doing it. So it really varies by office. But you really want to try to get in contact with like their legislative staff, because they're the ones that handle, the day in and day out stuff. And but one thing I will say, like, just be very respectful. Like I know it's very frustrating and all that stuff, but there's nothing worse than like getting a million calls a day and it's just like a bunch of angry people.
Yeah.
So yeah, just be respectful and really either
yeah. We've talked a lot on this show about how you can't get your message across if you're being a butthead to your politicians and their staff.
Yeah.
And we other girls, we don't do that. We call respectfully. We say our grievances. We say thank you so much for listening, and we have a good day. Then we pray about it. Like we don't have to do all the extra. You don't have to be mean to people. Just tell them the facts and then move on. Okay. Victoria, do you have anything else you think we should ask, or?
No, that was very eye-opening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah. And honestly, if anything else is coming up, if you don't mind coming back and talking to us, if you want a running seat on the show, just...
You can be our federal correspondent.
Yeah, if you want it, it's yours.
I don't know if I'm that expert, but I can definitely do the research.
I know we're putting you on the spot, but seriously, this was so good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, anytime.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. I hope that you guys learned and you took some notes. Make sure you contact your senators. Make sure you get to their legislative staff. Also, make sure you are signed up for our virtual summit. It is March 27th. It is quickly approaching. We're going to talk about topics like this. We're just going to do a lot of conservative girl talk. So grab a group of your friends, get in your pajamas, and you'll be able to log on, or you can dress up, whatever you feel like doing, because you can do it in your own home. All right. Anything else?
I think that's it. Do we have where we're doing donations this month? I know we haven't talked about that.
We haven't talked about that. So if you want to donate, you can donate to us. The link is on our site. Okay, everybody. Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.